Today, my guest is Professor Mike Hitt, and I will keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Mike as a person, Professor Hitt as a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally, as a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I will skip many of his accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. And Professor Hitt is one of the 10 most cited authors in management. Academy of Management Perspectives lists him as one of the top 2 management scholars in terms of combined impact, both in the field and outside of academia, and as one of the world's most influential scientific minds. He was the former editor of AMJ, was the co-editor of SEJ, is the editor-in-chief of Oxford Research Reviews. Mike won the 1996 and 99 awards for outstanding intellectual and academic contributions from the American Society for Competitiveness. He's a fellow of Academy of Management and Strategic Management Society. Mike was the former president of both the Academy of Management and Strategic Management Society and a member of the Academy of Management Journal's Hall of Fame. He received Best Paper Awards in the Academy of Management Executive, AMJ, Family Business Review, SMS, and the Journal of Management. Mike also won the Irwin Outstanding Educator Award and the Distinguished Service Award from AOM. Thank you, Mike, for joining us.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be with you.
First question, what did you want to become when you were a child?
Well, that's an interesting question. I thought about that a bit, because you sent some general ideas before. When I was really young, I actually wanted to be a great athlete, interestingly. And that partly because I had an older brother who was a very gifted athlete. So I looked up to him, so I wanted to be like him. But I discovered early in life that he was given the athletic talent. I was not. So I was going to have to find something else. I was rather average in size and in other physical capabilities. So I need to probably find a way to exercise maybe my mental capabilities or something to do better. I didn't look at it necessarily as an vocation, but it was something I wanted to do early. So after that, I would say a little bit later, I developed a desire, interestingly, to kind of have my own business or to manage a business. And that stayed with me for quite a while. So it started early in my life, and I don't know exactly timing, maybe back even late elementary education, but carried with me through early parts of even college. So that was a desire. And of course, that's why I've probably focused in business all of my education and my, even as I do as a professor. That interest has stayed with me. The interest in business has stayed with me.
I will jump a couple of questions and then go back to them. I would like to follow up on this. If you stopped doing what you were doing today, or if you didn't do this, what kind of business would you do? What is the thing that you would pursue?
Well, I don't know that I had an interest in a specific business. Early, I just kind of wanted to own my own business and run it. And I like the idea of the independence probably and having a business that served others. Later, I developed an interest in being an executive for a major, I'll say, multinational corporation. Now that again was still early in my life, but that was, so I don't know that it would be I didn't have a focus on a particular type of business as much as being in charge of a company that, it was very large, complex, and dealt with lots of products and services and so forth, and served customers well. So that was a desire. Now, if I hadn't done this, I would hope. I even actually spent some time in industry before getting the PhD. So this was not I actually felt I had to try that after getting my master's degree. and did for a short while. But I learned that the academic world is where I really should be and where I felt I really could make a better contribution and I think serve even better kind of my goals and serve others. So that's where I ended up going back and get the PhD. But
Well, we're very happy that you chose this field.
well, thank you. Thank you.
So, something that is not on your CV, there's something not many people know about you, a secret.
Wow. Well, yeah, I would say that I have two children. Now, this is an interesting part of this. I have a son and a daughter. Both of them have their own business. They're entrepreneurs, if you want to look at it that way, and they're service businesses. My son is a landscaper and designer, and he had artistic talents, but he's put that into the landscape design and has that business. And then my daughter worked for several years in industry, but in the advertising promotion area, and now she and her spouse have their own business in this area. So I guess they've somehow picked up a little bit of my desire. I don't know. And I have 4 wonderful grandchildren.
Very nice.
A grandson and 3 granddaughters.
Let's talk about regrets. What is one thing you wish you would have done that you didn't?
Wow. You know, that's really what I would look at and say my regrets are small. And when I say that, there's always, I could look back and say, I wish I had done that instead of this, or I went this direction. There was a time when early in my career, I'll say this, out of my dissertation, I had a couple of papers that got really pretty bad feedback, not unusual in most journals, but they were, you know, they were rejections, but they were bad. The feedback was pretty harsh. And I said, wow, if they're this bad, I don't want to embarrass myself. And so I put them aside and just started new projects and went from there. You know, looking back on that, I realized that what I should have done and what I have done ever since is learn from that feedback. And I could have published those in pretty good journals. You know, I know that now. But by the time I realized it, it was a little late. The work, those, what I felt those contributed had already been contributed by others. So I couldn't go back to them. So that was a regret, but I learned from that. So what I would say is a lot of times when I've had regrets like that, Gaz, I think I've learned from them. And then I move on from there. And it's really helped me because honestly, I don't remember a time that I've given up on a research project or a paper if I believed in it. If I believed that it had value, I've tried to stay with it and realize that value. Learn from any feedback I gain from colleagues or others, and then try to realize the value that it has. And so I learned and gained value from that experience, even though I wish I had gone ahead and learned at that time and used it. But yeah, again, I learned from that experience. Other times, I guess what I'd say is I've had opportunities unusual, and I've been blessed, you know, to be an editor at times when I wanted to be, and those were not only honor to do it, obviously hard work, but they're experiences again that I learned a tremendous amount of them. For example, I was AMJ editor many years ago, but I learned a lot from that experience because at that time the editor had to make a decision on every manuscript, and there were a lot of manuscripts submitted, not like today, but still a lot. And I learned a lot by reading all those manuscripts. And I think my research improved after the fact because of what I learned. So that's one of the blessings of being in this profession is learning. And it may not keep you young physically, but it keeps you young in mind. And so I've continued to learn. And so that's, again, a blessing. So I've had opportunities and to do things and leadership roles and so on that may have been a lot of work, took a lot of time, but actually were very beneficial to me in many other ways, and hopefully gave me a chance to give back to the profession and to others. So I hope that that has happened over the years.
Well, it did. It worked out great for you.
Thank you.
So how do you explain your research to laymen, people who don't know anything about your work? How do you explain yourself?
Well, I guess what I would say to that, Ilgaz, in some ways it's hard if you want to get down into details, but what I would say is I'm very interested in, I'm going to put this in a broad terms and say international strategy, but the strategies that firms use in operating in international markets. And there are many, many foci in that can be examined. But normally, if I were talking to say a friend, a business executive, or just another friend that did other things, I would tell them that I really try to learn more about why and how businesses operate effectively in international markets, and how they're successful in doing it. Now, not all are successful. We know that. Or some are successful for a while and then encounter competition and so on. And also the world changes. The other part of this that I would say today is obviously they have to be really quite agile and flexible, because the world changes pretty dramatically, such as the COVID and the pandemic that we're experiencing even today globally. And that affects all international firms in a whole variety of different ways. And to even remain viable at times, and depending on the industry, they have to be flexible, agile, and adapt their strategies. So I'm very interested in how firms not only are able to do this, but what they have to do to be agile and flexible in these environments that likely may have major disruptions, but I expect, just given the last 20 years, that we're likely to have more disruptions over time.
What are a few of the omitted variables in IB research? Things that you've seen underemphasized, underused, underutilized?
Wow, that's that's an interesting topic. Underutilized. Well, I would say I'm going to draw on some of the work I've done in other areas and that other people have done. I think if I look at IB research, really delving in depth into the resources and capabilities of firms, and delving into the structures of those firms. But structures are not only the multinational structures of subsidiary and home office and the authority that's given, but other structural dimensions that are important now to help them go back and be, as I said earlier, go back to my earlier comment of being agile, et cetera. And these large, really large, complex organizations, most of them, there are, today there are smaller and medium-sized firms that are also international, but that they have to be flexible, and it's very difficult to do that. Structures typically move toward being less flexible. Maybe is the kindest way I can say it, and that's, I think, true of all corporations, many of them. And it's very difficult to manage these large monolithic companies like the large multinationals. But they have to be, have to find ways to be able to respond to their environment. And that environment, both the markets and the political environments which they find in different countries, but also even the climate issues that are there today, are really quite important, and they probably will play a major role. And if there's any solutions found in helping to resolve some of the problems we face, even in the physical environment. So these are issues, and I think even the last element, or the last thing I mentioned, is something that's going to gain more traction in research in the next several years. I mean, sustainability and sustainability strategies have become of interest, but have not gained as much traction at times as some of our other stuff in international business. I would also mention, this kind of comes from different fields, but I think the digital strategies, the artificial intelligence, how it's used, has, well, there are a lot of issues that are both, if you just look at it from a strategy standpoint, but also from an international business dimension, that play a role. And of course, there's some controversial parts of that, as we know. But I expect these are issues that are important and haven't, certainly I'm not going to say they're non-existent, because I see and there are studies in these areas, but they haven't been as prominent as I think they're likely to become in the next decade of research.
I would like to talk to you about and ask your opinion and find out how this creativity, your creativity, is formed. How does, or what does your mind think of when it wanders freely? What do you do in your when you're not working on a paper? How do you come up with these creative ideas? What is the process?
That's an interesting question. Well, I will tell you two ways that probably some of my research, the ideas that I have come to me. One, they not unusual, I think, for many others, you and others probably. They come from questions that are derived from the current research I'm doing. And oftentimes they're kind of, I have sometimes discovered things and some findings that were not expected, and I would like to understand them better. Or how I got into the international research anyway. I started in organization theory and strategic management, or strategy. And actually, at the time I started, it was called business policy, not strategic management. Mm-hmm. Which had I had a strong economics background because of that. But I ended up with questions of the research, not only my own, but others, trying to understand why we weren't finding what we expected, and what were some of the factors. And I found that, in my own research, an unmeasured variable was the international dimension, or the international strategy, if you will, that these firms were employing. So that moved me in this direction, and now I've stayed with it for many, many years because I found that a fascinating area to study. So I would say that a lot of times the questions have come from my research. That was going way back, but that's true of even today. A second is maybe a little bit different than that, since you talked about creative or being creative. I don't know that it's creative, but I arise very early in the morning, and I spend time early. I look at kind of the news and my email and any other elements that I think find interesting. But then I spend about an hour of exercise, and today it has differed over the time, but today it's walking. And I walk for about an hour every morning, and I spend this time thinking. The nice thing about it is it's quiet. Because it's early in the morning, I really don't have distractions, and I have kind of nature around me, and I really spend time thinking about ideas, and some of it's my research projects, and sometimes I work out issues that are related to what I'm working on. But I've gotten ideas there for new projects at times. I don't want to say every day, but occasionally. So I find that for me, it's been a very productive time because I don't have interruptions and I don't have other things kind of demanding my time or my thought time, etc. So those are two ways, at least, that I think I've benefited. Now I'll mention a third. I have done work singly, I've done single authored work, but most of my work is not single authored. And part of that, there are probably good reasons for that. One is certainly others have capabilities I might not, and so we're complementary. But I also find that I get their ideas from others that are helpful. And particularly if we can work together, oftentimes we work out issues, problems, and even have new ideas and new studies. So I get ideas from my colleagues and my friends and associate students with whom I work. And I've found that to be a valuable source as well. So I don't want to claim it's all mine. There are many others that have had inputs into that and have helped me along the way in this way and in this regard.
Perfect. Now the advice part. What is the best advice you received?
Well, I'll give a very specific, and I don't think this is anything unique, but I do think it's worth emphasizing. I think in our world today, and certainly in the academic world, there are a lot of pressures. There have been all along, but there are even more today. Pressures to succeed, to do well, and there's a lot of competition, increasing competition for, just say, space in journals and for your ideas and your ability to succeed. And there's pressure then to publish. We know that. That's been there all along, but competition is really stiff. And I would say don't cut any corners at all. Ethically, always remain above. No matter what the pressures are, even if it means you don't succeed where you are in that position, you'll succeed the next time. I won't mention any people, but I've been fortunate. I haven't experienced that problem, but I know some highly successful, very today well-known people that say didn't succeed the first time in their first job. When they say don't succeed, I don't want to say they failed. They didn't fail, but they may have said this isn't going to work. I'm going somewhere else. But then succeeded with unbelievable contributions. And sometimes contributions take a while to germinate and to come to fruition, bring them to fruition. So just stay above the fray and always maintain that. I don't think that's anything unique. The other thing I would say, there are kind of two parts of this. Early in my career, I know I had a dean who set me down and gave me advice. He said, Mike, it's obvious you do good work. This was a kind thing. He said, because you publish it in good journals, because he was an economist. So he didn't know as much about what I did, but he knew the value of the journals where you publish. And of course, that's true of many of us. So he said, I can tell by that. But he said, you're publishing in a variety of different journals in different areas. And my advice to you is really focus. He said, because you're not going to ever make it in this profession and make a name for yourself and really succeed. You really need to focus. And that actually is good advice. That is good advice, I think. Because I give that advice to most of my students and others if I'm asked. I think it is good to do that. Now, I have to say I haven't done that. It's probably pretty obvious if people look at my background and over time, the work I've done. What I have done is I've followed ideas that I've really found interesting. And that's what kept me motivated, kept me interested, and I found the most interest. So I never got bored. And so I didn't follow that advice. I didn't follow it at that time. I felt it was good advice. I really gave it a lot of thought, but I didn't want to give up some of the things that I was doing and I really felt were of value. And so, I'll use an example, at the time I'd published some papers in Journal of Applied Psychology and Personnel Psychology, and those didn't fit with most of my more macro orientation. And that's what he was really talking about, versus the other kind of work I was doing. And, but I was really interested in that. I mean, that was because there were some specific things I was interested in that I was doing at that time, and I didn't want to stop that, and I didn't. And I ended up serving, I think it was, I forgot what, but I think it was a 6-year term on the editorial review board of Journal of Applied Psychology. I was their token macro person. I think that's what I used that term. I got a lot of top management team and with the papers that were executive oriented, but still had a behavioral emphasis. They sent them to me, I think, partly because of that. And but I found it fascinating because I learned again. But now I haven't done a lot of that, and that's not been a primary focus of my work. Again, my primary work today, and has been for a long time, has been really strategy, but really international strategy is my interest and focus.
I mean, it clarifies a lot of things. When you say don't do a lot of variety, but focus, you're not really saying only publish in AM or AMJ, and digression is not SMJ and AMJ at the same time. I mean, Journal of Applied Psychology is very micro, right?
Right.
Not many people can pull off that thing because it requires a lot of bandwidth, a lot of horsepower, a lot of bandwidth, not only in macro, but also micro. Not many people can pull it off.
Well, I agree. I think the key, though, out of all that, I agree with you. Now, I was also blessed to have good colleagues with whom to work. See, that's going back to my earlier comment. We're in complementary skills. But I would also say that part of the advice that staying focused is a good thing, but you have to be motivated, stay interested in what you're doing, and do work that you find interesting and of value that you think will make a contribution. And if you do that, you'll stay hopefully motivated for a long time in your career. And that's because I've been in this career a long time. And
Mike,
that's why I think I've been able to do it.
You developed many people. You developed a lot of faculty, a lot of scholars. You're the professor of professors. So I would like to ask you, what are the top 3 mistakes that IB scholars or general in our field, what are the top 3 big mistakes that people should be avoiding?
Well, that's a really good question, because I think we do. One is I think I don't believe it. As I said, I've learned not to give up on papers, and sometimes papers that maybe aren't designed or fit well. Let's say JIBS, which is our top journal in IB, but might go in a really, I'll say, a good journal and still have value. Don't give it up. If you believe it has value, don't give it up. And let me use an example that I think your mentor, one of your mentors anyway, Jay Barney, because he was on the faculty at A&M, so I got to know Jay pretty well before he came to Ohio State. I use this as an example, I think quite good. He had a paper that he has said, so I'm not telling this out of context. I mean, he has said this. I believe this paper was rejected at AMR and at Management Science, I believe. And then he published it in Journal of Management. Now, Journal of Management is a tremendous journal today, but at the time he did that was 1991. And it was not, it was a good journal, but it wasn't as well thought of as it is today. because we all know that that paper has garnered an incredible number of citations, perhaps the most of any article in the field, including going across strategy, OB, IB. Certainly, it's among the top ones, and well cited in the international business literature, for example, as appropriately as resources very critical. He didn't give up. The point is, he found, and he put it in a good journal, but not the top one. So sometimes I think young people, because they know that it may not count for it count in the same way as the top journal, they may give it up. And my opinion, you don't do that. If you think it has value, and I don't mean just go publish it anywhere, but find a good place for it. If you think it has value, then make sure it has value. That's one. I think the other is just don't give in to pressures, and also the only other thing I would say and I try to make this point, it's hard, it's easy for me to say now, but it's a long profession, and you have a long look to the long term, not to the short term. That's hard to do again when you're early in your career. Let's say an untenured assistant professor, but it's a long career, and if you do good work, if you really work hard, you're going to succeed. You'll do well, and you'll make contributions. So don't take just short-term projects. Look at I'm not telling you not to take on projects that may have short-term value, but also look to the longer term. And I really encourage that. And part of that's to keep you focused that this is a great profession. I mean, I wouldn't change what I did for anything. It's been wonderful for me and a wonderful experience.
Well,
Looking at the long term is helpful.
After all, you turned out to be a marathon runner, right? You became an athlete.
I don't know that that's true, but I've been fortunate to have some success. But it's a lot of that is because of a lot of other people with whom I've worked, and very beneficial, from whom I've learned. So I'm just a product of many others, and all my students and colleagues and so on.
Admirable. One last question. What is one question that I should have asked you but didn't?
Well, you've covered a lot of territory, I would tell you, Hilgaz. Well, I guess you haven't, but it's one that you had thought about, is the future of the field. And we did talk a little bit about kind of unmeasured variables, and I really did talk there about some things that I think will come in the future. So we kind of covered it, and I think that's probably why you didn't ask it, because I'd already really done some of that. I would say, though, there is one quote that I ran across actually very recently that I think is really, for me, it really kind of summarizes the opportunities, but also the concerns, problems in IB research, is from Douglas North, one of our, in international business, one of our, I'll call it guru, but he's certainly somebody I've looked up to for a long time. And he Nobel Prize winner for an institutional economist. I ran across an address he gave about 20 years ago, and he referred to operating in a non-ergodic world. And I have to admit, I had to look up what ergodic stood for. What was the meaning exactly? And it really just means we operate in a kind of an open system world where things change and nothing remains the same, and tomorrow will be different than today. And so what that tells me is several things. Obviously, looking at a pandemic, you can see that, but more than that is that there's just continuous opportunities. And I think in international business, they're really that way because of all the changes that occur in political systems, in international markets, some economic changes, but also others that make it an exciting area in which to do research, and it means that we have to continue. What we've learned 20 years ago still is relevant, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what we're going to be doing and what we should be doing, what companies should be doing tomorrow and the next 10 years. So we have to continue to study it, which means there are many opportunities to continue to contribute for young scholars as well as others.
Beautiful. Mike, thank you so much for your time for this candid interview. I learned a lot. I will start walking now. I will start thinking for an hour every day. And I learned the word ergotic. This is important.
Well, thank you, Elgaz. It's my
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
And please give my regards to Ashley as well, would you?
Of course.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Goodbye.